We have a big UFC approaching this weekend and Alex Pereira is headlining. Now, because of that, there's been lots of extra media around him lately, and I saw an interview the other day on GQ with him talking about how many hours a day he is training versus when he was younger. And this is something so important for all up-and-coming fighters to understand. Only days left until my Strike Ready Takedown course begins. Make sure you guys get yourself registered so on Monday you have access to the 25 videos, and throughout the 5 weeks you can join the 3 live calls. We're gonna learn how to catch kicks, toss people down, stop yourself from getting tossed as well, how to throw people to the ground from the clinch. So much amazing information will be coming your way. Now, training. What high-level fighters are doing to become champions. This is something that has always interested me because as an athlete living on a small island, sort of off in the corner of Canada, I didn't have access to talking to high-level professionals or have coaches who were coaching high-level professionals. So a lot of times my method to doing what I thought was required to be my best version to win fights, I had to go online, do research, and find, oh, how many hours a day is this guy training? How often are they running per week? How do they combine their cross training and their set training for fight sports? All of this I didn't know. So I had to learn and research. And when I see somebody like Alex Pereira talking about it, I go, wow, everybody on the channel needs to hear this because it is so very important. So the first thing that he says is he is not running that much nowadays.
Hoje estou correndo pouco, 2 vezes na semana, 40 minutos cada corrida.
Now, many fighters, when they're starting out, they go, okay, I gotta be doing the 10K runs. I gotta be putting in the road work every day. And a lot of people find that it starts to really hurt the body. They get joint pain through the hips, the knees, other issues can happen. Maybe they just hate it. And there are alternative ways to get that cross training instead of just running, right? You can do a salt bike, you can swim. There's so many other options. But as long as you're getting some cross training, that's great. But Alex Pereira is saying he's only doing 2 running sessions per week, and they're only about 40 minutes. Now, he does not go into detail if it's a straight 40-minute run or if it's 40 minutes of like sprint, stop, sprint, stop, sprint, stop. I think the latter is much smarter because you're not fighting a big, long, consistent pace fight. It's up and down, up and down. But to everybody on the channel, you also need to keep in mind, what is your fight style versus Pereira's style? When you look at him, he is so relaxed in the ring. His output of volume is also quite low. He'll hit a few shots, he'll take a real long break. And because he hits so hard, many people are unwilling to try and pressure him. So going, okay, Alex Pereira only runs twice a week and only for 40 minutes, therefore I can do it. Even somebody like myself, I am more of, I'm gonna push the pace on my opponent, therefore my cardio needs to be really good. That means I'm running more like 4 or 5 times per week. Each run is approximately 40 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes. That's sort of a lot of break time included in there because I'm doing more so sprints than long distance running.
Hoje eu diminui o meu treino, né? Quando eu comecei, os primeiros 5 anos ali, foram treinos ali, acho que eu precisava disso, né? Eu treinava ali 4 horas por dia e era direto, praticamente.
So next, Alex talks about when he started. In the first 5 years, he was training 4 hours per day. He needed that. What does he mean when he says that? Well, you need it to improve. You need to push your body, and you're not going to be able to challenge yourself in the same way if you're doing less volume. Now, 4 hours per day, to many people might still sound like, oh, that's not as much as I thought. Because we hear rumors of guys like Mike Tyson or Buakaw, like, oh, they train 6 to 8 hours per day. No, I think those are rumors that get grossly embellished. I was training alongside Buakaw for a while in Thailand, and I was expecting to see him training 6 to 8 hours per day, but realistically it was more like 4 to 5 hours per day, a lot of low intensity stuff. And we have to keep in mind, what is the intensity we're putting in? But he's saying 4 hours back then is what he was doing. Sometimes, very often, probably doing those 4 hours all together, because if you have a job, you have to go do that job and maybe you only have that 4 hours in the evening. It's much easier to just blast through and do a whole bunch. You go for a long run, you come back, you do some training, but in general, I'm doubting that the intensity that you would want is going to be there. It's not ideal. If you're doing 4 hours, it's much better to do 2 and then a big long break and then another 2 later in the day, probably in the evening. Morning and evening makes the most sense. But somebody like him is now saying, I'm not doing that anymore.
Hoje eu estou dividindo os meus treinos e menor quantidade ainda. Quando eu estou nos meus treinos normais, eu treino 1h30 todos os dias.
So the first thing that he is saying is just throughout the year, when he's not in training camp, it's an hour and a half per day, which for a normal person is probably something that they can accomplish. If you're interested in your fitness, you're interested in improving in some element of a sport, an hour and a half a day is a good amount of time to put in. So Pereira, in this sense of only putting in that many hours, or that hour and a half, he is not looking to dramatically improve. He's looking to maintain. To me, that is a maintenance thing, that many hours per day. But I do really believe that it is okay for the average person to do that. You don't need to be going, okay, all year long, I'm gonna put in 3 or 4 hours per day. Your body is gonna get worn down. And if you're looking for longevity, the way Alex Pereira is managing to do right now, because I believe he's 37, and he is top of his weight class, one of the best in the world, you're not slowing down at 37 because he's not being ridiculous with his training. But then he goes on to say, when he's in training camp, then it bumps up.
E quando é no camp, eu faço ali de 2h30 a 3 horas por dia.
But it only bumps up to 2.5 to 3 hours per day. And many people might be going, wow, that is a lot less than I thought. But I know from experience for myself, when training is all about me, when it's all about people pushing me, I'm not holding pads for others, I'm not wasting my time helping other people, an hour and a half training session can be brutal. So if you go do an hour and a half training session where you get a little shadow in, maybe a little bag work, you're smashing pads, you're doing drills, you're sparring, an hour and a half is a long time. And then an hour and a half later in the day to do something like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do my run, and then I'm gonna do some weights, and then I'm gonna do some abs, all of a sudden that gets eaten up very quick. So 2.5 to 3 hours allows him to put in the work he needs, but not decimate his body. And in the past, I was making the mistake of doing 4 to 5 hours per day, pushing crazy hard in camp, and feeling the damage and the fatigue. And you kind of go, okay, yeah, I'm training really hard, but because I'm putting in so many hours, what is the quality of my training sessions? Do they start to diminish? You're still pushing as hard as you can, but maybe you could push more. You could push harder if you weren't so fatigued. And there was actually something that I saw Faris, I believe, I'm drawing a blank on his last name, GSP's coach, saying you should never train 100%. Right? He said, very, very rarely I'll tell the fighters, okay, we're gonna go really, really hard today, but you're not putting in 100% because you're gonna decimate your body. So this idea that these shorter sessions are really gonna benefit you, well, I think that's very true. And I think trying to push 100% for these long volume sessions is just no good. You cannot maintain it. I'm speaking from experience. I had to draw back. I do exactly what Alex Pereira does. When I'm outside of training camp, I'm kind of doing an hour to 2 hours per day. When I'm in training camp, it's more like 2 to 3 hours per day. And we're talking about 5 days per week. On Saturdays, I do 1 session for 1 hour. And this is all based off hearing fighters like Pereira, fighters like Masato, all these high-level people throughout the world telling me through sources like this, through YouTube, through interviews, how often they train. And from that, we can glean so much information and start structuring our own training in a way that's gonna benefit us the most. So hopefully this helps you guys. Hopefully it allows you to make some adjustments in your training to be a little bit more like Pereira, a little bit more like myself, and allow your body a long, long career where you're not injuring yourself fatiguing yourself or just mentally burning out.